Hey folks, welcome back. We're going to continue with chapter 1 and finish up with the Neolithic period. The Neolithic period truly begins at around 9000 BCE. So the Paleolithic that we were looking at spanned from around 40,000 BCE all the way up to about 10,000 BCE, and around this time, around 9000 BCE, is where we start to see the transition into Neolithic. And if you recall in map 1.2, we can see that that's present-day Turkey all the way down to present-day Iraq. And that is the Neolithic area, or that's the area where we see most of the Neolithic findings in archaeology. And again, the reason for that, it's a much warmer area. It's more further south from where this glacier ice age, or the glacier byproducts of the ice age, pushed down towards the land from the north. And as the glacier started to recede, that area in present-day Middle East is the first place where we start to see the developments of the Neolithic period. And the key developments of the Neolithic period are settlement, meaning that the humans, or the folks at that time, were not as interested in moving around everywhere, because again, the migration lead, or the migration guide, the bovine or the bull or bison, were not really moving around that much either, because that land was starting to become more fertile from the receding glaciers, and the vegetation and the flora in those areas were way more abundant. So the need for moving around was not necessary. So the folks during this Neolithic period started to settle, and with settlement comes structure and shelter and homes. And so now we'll start to see an interest in wanting to build structures, still very rudimentary in nature, but the attempt on using the stone from no longer a permanent fixture of, like, let's say the cave whenever it comes to the artistry, but now more of a fabricated material where they're going to design and use to help develop these structures in these places where they're going to reside. All right, so one of the very first, very key feature to the Neolithic period is they're going to start to settle down. They're no longer going to really be on the move. There will still be some hunting and gathering, but it's predominantly going to be a more settled way of life. And with a settled way of life come two different things, and both of them are husbandries. One is vegetable husbandry, which is agriculture, and the other is animal husbandry, which is just simple animal domestication. So instead of trying to go out and bring the deer in and hunt the deer, there's going to be more of a interest in trying to keep them in a certain location, or maybe even domesticating in a way for a continuous supply of food. It could be other animals too. The hunting for the reindeer could still be very prominent, and then there could be more domestication of other animals, mostly for maybe byproducts, like let's say a milk byproduct, and not so much for a flesh or a meat byproduct. Then we have the vegetable husbandry, which is just simple agriculture, learning how to take the seeds from the plant and then using that as a way to sow a field of crops. So three main things with Neolithic: they're going to settle down, build living structures instead of living in the caves or outside of the mouths of the caves. They're also going to have animal husbandry, which is domestication of certain animals, and then they're also going to have agriculture. So those are going to be three main staples of the Neolithic period. And if you look at figure 112, you can see one of these stone structures, one of these stone pillars present. And this is found in present-day Turkey around 9000 BCE, and you can see that this large T-shaped stone pillar has been fabricated and redesigned to fit to the needs of the structure that they're using this pillar for. The structure for this, with this pillar, could have been for the sheltering of animals. It could have been for the sheltering of vegetation or grain. It could have been for the sheltering of actually the human family. We're really not completely sure. But the fact is they're now taking the stone and they're chiseling and reshaping and re-engineering and refabricating and designing based off of this figure as an example for us. You can also see that there's still an interest in the everyday, meaning still what they may see on an everyday. There are three animals that have been carved and chiseled out of this pillar. And those three are the fox, the warthog, and a feline, most likely a puma of some kind. And these three animals are, again, animals that they're going to see on a day-to-day basis in their new settled area. Some also believe that these are based off of imagination or remembrance of some other areas that used to be sought out during more of the hunting and gathering aspects. But most likely these are, again, showing some kind of echelon or hierarchy of importance of animals, meaning the highest, the puma or the feline form, is going to have the highest position, and then the lower warthog and fox positions are going to be at the bottom or at the base of this pillar. So this is really a good example of decorating. Let's say this is the home of a family, kind of decorating the walls. And what we do today is we put up paintings, we put up sayings or quotes or tapestries or this or that. And in this case, what they're doing is they're chiseling away, carving away at the stone pillar to reveal the importance and homage of these said animals. And also know with figure 112 that this is another example of relief carving. So they're carving around the contour and the shape of these animals to reveal the narrative of these animals and these figures upon a surface of a material, and it's not cut completely out in the round. The animal shapes are not. The pillar itself has been fabricated in the round, but the animals themselves are carved relief sculptures. Figure 113 is an aerial view of Jericho to give you an idea of what some of these settlements look like around 8000 BCE. And within this image, in this aerial perspective, you can see that there is an elevated perspective, meaning that the settlement is on a higher ground. And with natural runoff of water coming from the rains, it goes down into the ag fields, which is, again, that vegetable husbandry that you see in the foreground or in the front of that photo. So a lot of the settlement was up high, which is a great way for defense in the event that another group or another community or another clan or whatever may come in and try to remove you from your land. So by having the upper ground, it creates that defense. It also adds for a proper natural runoff of water to get into the vegetable fields, and then also it houses everything up high. And keeps everything up off of the more moist ground. A lot of these shapes are roadway systems throughout this small plot of settled land. There's U-shape or horseshoe shape like formations, which could have been mock walls that were designed, as well as maybe the back sections of where some of these original settlements or the homes and structures might have been. There is in this image a canal in the middle. That's actually the excavation canal where they've been digging into the bottom underneath Jericho, so that the discoveries of a lot of the items that we're getting ready to look at were revealed. All right. And in figure 114, the human skull with restored features is one of our first findings from Jericho around 7200 BCE. Now, one thing I want to mention in the description of this information that's next to the human skull, there's something called CA period. That means around, like a circumvented around that time, meaning that it could have been 7,200 years, it could have been 6,800, BCE. It really just depends. We can't carbon date and radon date to that very specific year. We have to have a range or a tolerance. And what they're doing here is they're actually starting to focus more on the individual. So there's more of an interest in each person that's part of the community instead of just the overall circular nature or the collective nature of the family or the community. So as hunting and gatherers during the Paleolithic period, it's very much about everybody having a hand and working collectively like a unit, because without that your unit won't survive, because it's a very harsh environment during that ice age. But here in the Neolithic period, there's more of a focus on the individual. And this is a really good example of that. And this is a skull that was found, that was part of a burial ceremony, or just part of a finding of a skull. And the interest of the artist was to reapply clay to the surface, or I'm sorry, not clay, plaster, which is a calcium-based material, onto the surface of the skull to try to redesign the facial features of the person that passed away. Now, this might seem a little strange or morbid at first, but if you think about it, a lot of cosmetics and in mortuaries and such, they try to really reinvent the emotion and the personality of an individual today that might pass away before they're buried in the earth. So this is an attempt of showing the importance of that individual by trying to reconstruct those facial features. And then also it can be just simply an attempt to learn technique on modeling with material upon another material. And we saw that modeling process in the two bisons back in the Paleolithic, where they took the clay from the river and they impacted it on top of the stone. So this is another example of that modeling process, taking the skull as a substructure and then building the plaster on top to try to remodel some of these facial features. Learning how to design a nose, the cheekbones, the eyelids, and everything that corresponds with human features, the ears, etc. You can see where some of that plaster has been broken away around the bottom part of the mandible, which is the lower section of the jaw, and some of the natural skull is revealed underneath that plaster. So when you look at this, that lower jaw, that's kind of ivory white, or not ivory white, kind of a beige white, that is the skull. The upper section on the crown or on the top of the human skull is the skull, and then everything that's reddish in hue is the plaster. And then the eyes are actually made of inlaid seashells. So that is not the skull in the optics or in the orbitals. That is actually seashells. All right. So this is a way of using a substructure to try to develop that individuality. So you can see in this Neolithic period, there's a lot of extra time. The plants are sowed, they're harvested, the grains are harvested, the animals are rounded up, the hunt is much quicker, it's warmer longer out of the year, so there's more time to really create more art. And then this is one way for them to start to advent and create these ideas. Then you look at figure 115 and you can see that instead of using the human skull, they're interested in making the overall body. And this is over 3 feet tall, so they're trying to get more lifelike. But there's no substructure to work with, so they're having to model and arrange this plaster in a way to try to create more of the individual features. Yes, it's still very abstract, it's very rudimentary, kind of crude in nature, but they're learning, and they have time to learn more of this artistry. And you have exaggerations like in the small arms, the elongated neck, but they are attempting. And if you take figure 115 and you compare it to 114, you can see like in the nose and in the areas around the eyes and the ears, they're very similar. So they're trying to get some kind of genre or some kind of specific way in which they sculpt the human face in particular. And now they're making the attempt to sculpt the human body as well. It is very flat in nature, but they are making the attempt. And this is one of our first sculptures showing that humans are interested in creating humans out of art, or via the avenue of visual arts. The bitumen is the painted element that's going on top to kind of emphasize the eyes. So those are the materials that are being used to create and kind of emphasize different features of the human form. All right, give me just 1 second. Then we have figure 116, and this is an interest in trying to develop depth in landscape. We have a line that runs right down the middle that's supposed to show a background and a foreground. And not only are they starting to try to show landscape in different, what's called a vanishing point or different dimensionality in a landscape, but they're also showing different activities. Up high, you have this large reindeer, and you have these figures. And these figures are using that carbon, all right? And that carbon is supposed to indicate one type of human. And you can also see that there's more animation involved, and there's a lot of kinetics and kind of organic movement that they're attempting to develop, which really wasn't present in the Paleolithic. And that's a big difference between the Paleolithic and the Neolithic, is there's more of a focus on the human aspects in Neolithic and less about human aspects in the Paleolithic. It's more about the animals in the Paleolithic. Now that they're settled, they see lots of humans around them all the time doing new things, so they're starting to document that. It's less about the animals. Versus Paleolithic, they were constantly in action trying to get the animals and to get the food, that it's less about them and it's more about gathering the animals, collecting the meat from the animals. So here we see a lot of human activity. The deer is still present, it's very prominent, it's very large, but you can see that there's humans that are designed with the carbon from the soot, and there's also humans that are designed with the pigment from the rocks or pebbles from the rivers. And so some are red and some are black. So it's just showing like a differentiation of different folks. It could be different people from different groups, or it could be people of the same group, maybe woman, maybe man. We don't know for sure, but it is starting to show an interest in diversification. Then in figure 117, we're going to start to get into what are called the megaliths, and we're going to jump over to Ireland, over to the United Kingdom, and we're going to start to see how the stones are being used in this part of the world around 3200 BCE, because remember, the Neolithic findings in the UK and in Ireland are going to reveal themselves before they reveal themselves really in other parts of Europe. That's because that glacier is moving away east and uncovering the land more and warming up the land more in the United Kingdom area than the rest of Europe. So we'll see some Neolithic discoveries. But notice the date, 3200. That's still nearly 6,000 years later than the first discoveries we find in Jericho in the Middle East, present-day Jordan. So still there's a 6,000 year difference, which is really quite something. But these are going to be some of the first areas we see that use of Neolithic discoveries and techniques. And what they are using in Ireland is they're using, again, the stone for fortification, for shelter, just like they were in Jericho, just like they were in the present-day Middle East during this time. We saw the T-shaped pillar that was chiseled down. In this case, we see a little bit of chiseling of stone to stack. And this specific stacking technique in figure 117 is called the corbelled. So the corbelled dome is just interstacking locked, broken down shale pieces of stone to create a dome shape. So slowly bringing the archway into a dome that holds itself together. Either could be for worshiping practices, or it could be used for sheltered practices. Either or, it's a place to shelter and remain for a period of time instead of going out and having to migrate, which was something that happened during the Paleolithic time. The sheltering and settling down happens in the Neolithic period. And you can see figure 117a is an example of what a house looked like around 3000 BCE. Lots of stones. There probably was some kind of thatched roof that was on top to keep everyone warm. You can see where there's now little pockets of areas where certain people can stay and sleep. Kind of rooms are being dissected and generated inside of the stone dome structure. And you may ask yourself, well, they're on an island. You know, of course they didn't go anywhere. But remember, it was all covered by a glacier. Everything was on this glacier. And it didn't matter if you were on an island. Your island was covered up by this glacier. So the channels and the waterways in between the United Kingdom and that of Europe were all coated by this glacier. So there really was no island living during the Paleolithic, but during the Neolithic, the islands started re-emerging as the glacier receded and thawed, and then they started settling in that area. There's another aerial view of some of these ruins and what they look like. Figure 118. Again, taking what are called these megaliths and building them and developing different structures, different living quarters. So again, the stone in the Neolithic was meant mostly for living, shelter, versus the stone in the Paleolithic was used to document information using pigments and carbon through drawing or through painting or through chiseling down. All right. So again, these are called megalithic tombs or megalithic living quarters. Mega, big, lithic, stone. So it's all, that's why we call this the Stone Age. Paleolithic, Neolithic are both the Stone Age because stone is your main material that's being used. Figure 119 is to show you how they started using these stones for constructive purposes. This is called a post and lintel system. The posts are the vertical and the lintel is the horizontal. And where we see the use of the post and lintel is figure 120. And this post and lintel system is going to become very important in the rest of Europe as we start moving into actual architectural construction. Right? Now, what I really want you to know as a visual arts standpoint with Stonehenge, which is figure 120, is that architectural use of post and lintel and the fact that they're using these megalithic forms to develop this shape, and it either is for ritualistic purposes or whatnot. We know it's not a shelter, but we do know that they were chiseled and designed to fit in a certain configuration, and that configuration does correspond with astronomy. It does correspond with the movement of the sun. We do know that, but we don't know specifically how it was arranged, put together. All we know is that the humans and the folks at this time in this Neolithic period were interested in using the stones to configure and fabricate architectural design. And they're using the post and lintel system to create megalithic architectural design. Okay, I'll leave you with that in regards to Neolithic. And we'll be getting into the Chapter 2 PowerPoint very soon and talking about ancient Mesopotamia and the beginnings of documented Western civilization. Take good care. Thank you.